Welcome to the Red Wagon Estate Planning and Elder Law Show. I'm Jeff Belomo, where we discuss all things estate planning and elder law, and well, hey, anything else we want to talk about. And today is going to fall under and anything else we want to talk about, sort of nursing home, elder law topic. So it'll be a little bit of fun. I have a friend of mine with me today, William Eadie, who was with Eadie nursing home abuse lawyer, Eadie Law, which is a friend from Ohio. So I'm looking forward to having this conversation. Just want to remind people, as always, and just do our disclaimers, please do not take this advice or any advice from any radio show or other radio show that you hear as legal advice. If you need advice for a certain particular area, please seek out an attorney in your area who is licensed to practice in the state that you are in and specializes in the area that you are looking for. This is for informational and educational purposes only. There. Now that we got the disclaimers out of the way, now we get to have a little bit of fun. Just a reminder to my listeners, we offer free educational workshops at Belomo and Associates, estate planning, crisis Medicaid planning, probate administration, trust administration, and special needs planning. If you have a group and you would like us to come speak, please reach out to the office and we will have our outreach coordinator connect with you to have us scheduled for an upcoming event. We would certainly love to do that and be present at your function. All right, well, Will, it's good to have you on the podcast today. How you doing, man?
Great, man. And I have to do my own disclaimer. It's Eadie Hill. I don't want my partner, Michael Hill, thinking I'm trying to pull a bait and switch. He is the bee's knees, so I got to make sure he gets a shout out. He's at least 50% of the pie, so I want to make sure he gets.
Well, please tell him to forgive me. That is totally my fault. That is my fault 100%. So please just send him my apologies. I appreciate that clarification. So just out of curiosity, tell the listeners a little bit about who you are and kind of where you come from.
Sure. So I'm an Ohio nursing home abuse lawyer along with my partner, Michael Hill, and we are actually in Ohio, Western PA, and we're moving towards Kentucky. We only do nursing home abuse and neglect, and what that means in a nutshell is when a nursing home resident is injured or killed through neglect of the nursing home, we're the folks that the family reaches out to, often through someone like yourself if they've dealt with, done some planning or done some work to get some assistance with that. They often refer them to us to investigate, figure out what happened, figure out if it was the nursing home's fault, and then if so, try to get some accountability for that. And our tagline is helping to end nursing home abuse or ending nursing home abuse, which has really just become kind of a mission for us. We're about six and a half years old now, and this is really all we do. So there's not a lot of firms in town or in the state or frankly around the country that only focus on this work, and it gives us sometimes unfortunate or sad insights, but insights into kind of what's going on in the long-term care industry, whether it's assisted living, nursing home, memory care, all those kinds of things. And
wow.
The one thing I always tell people is they ask me, what's a good nursing home? And I always say, look, I don't see them on their good days. I can tell you some to avoid, but if I haven't heard of them, that's usually the best sign that I can give you. If I tell you I don't know, that's usually a good thing.
That's a real good thing. Now, I'm curious, what brought you into that field? Is something that happened or just a passion or?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and some of our lawyers, we've expanded and have now, I think at this point, 4 lawyers beyond Michael and myself who are working on this. And they actually have some interesting stories themselves as to how they came to appreciate this, some family connections, things like that. For me, I was at a prestigious PI firm, which for some people is maybe an oxymoron, but medical malpractice and personal injury, and they did a great job. They did everything, right? Kind of a jack of all trades. And I got into this nursing home work as just one of, I sued an international manufacturing company on behalf of an iron smelter. I sued, dog bite cases. We sued Walmart in a class action. And I got into this couple nursing home cases and figured out that, at least in Ohio at the time, the consensus seemed to be these are like car crash cases with old sick people who aren't worth much. And that just didn't sit right with me. I felt like, well, wait a second. To me, it was much more like a birth injury case. Kind of, you think about the cycle of life, vulnerable children. Well, by the time you get to a long-term care setting, you're vulnerable. Families are putting their trust in these long-term care institutions, and when that trust is violated, to me, that seemed like a big deal. And
Yeah.
I just kept getting struck by the idea of the lack of dignity. And, the response was, well, they're old, they're sick, they're going to die, which, by the way, people in a nursing home are not necessarily on death's door. You can spend 10, 20 years in long-term care of different levels. But in any event, that was kind of the consensus. And so when I talked to insurance adjusters, defense lawyers, even plaintiffs' lawyers, frankly, the attitude was, we want a car crash case where someone's a 25-year-old stockbroker who's never going to work again. We want a life care plan. We want, all these things. And when they looked at these cases, there just wasn't a value placed on that life that matched, frankly, what I learned from these families. So
Wow.
I didn't have a background personally with that, but getting to know these families, what they went through, the sense of betrayal that they felt, just resonated with me. And so we had my now partner, Michael Hill, and I had the really privilege of representing a family in a case where we said no and no and no to a lot of settlement offers and finally got a $4.4 million verdict and kind of proof of concept that jurors would be upset by this, that it does matter what happened. And we led from that to launching our own firm where originally I'll say we were thinking truck crash and nursing home. And I think we had like strokes and heart attacks, which Michael has a deep expertise in. And within, I don't even think we advertised for trucking crash cases day one. We just decided very quickly, we're going to laser focus. This is what we're going to do. We're going to become the experts in this, and really haven't looked back. It's been rewarding to feel like we're doing good work out there. And at the same time, and somewhat unfortunately, we have job security because there's 900 some nursing homes in Ohio, and plenty of them are not doing what they need to do. I will say one last thing, and I'm sorry I'm talking so much, but
No, please.
I hasten to add, we are not suing or enemies of nurses, nursing aides. In our experience, except in a rare case, they're coming to work to do good work. They want to help, and it's really the companies and often the parent company or the chain that is dictating how many residents they have to care for, how much staff support they have, and they're really, to a lesser degree maybe than our clients, victims often too, because they want to help and they have to choose between helping this person eat or helping that person go to the bathroom. They have to choose between answering a call late or getting someone dressed every day, and it really puts them in a tough position. And we see a lot of, in the nursing industry, and nursing aides, a lot of burnout, addiction issues, not dissimilar than what you see in lawyers, frankly, high stress lawyer profession. And it's really sad. So that's kind of how we got into it. I felt blessed that we were able to get into it. And I hope we can have some role as we grow and do more to help make it better out there.
So this is more of a curiosity question, and you'll know from the question that I am not a litigator, and I really, very early on in my career, 20 years ago, I did a little bit of it. But as we grow up, you see all these shows on TV and everyone in a courtroom, and I always tell people, and even on the podcast, I've said, even when I was a litigator, I was rarely in court. Most stuff settled and most stuff was done outside of court. But are you doing more courtroom stuff because of the type of litigation, or is it pretty similar for you as well?
That's a great question. So statistically, and folks who aren't kind of in the business like us won't necessarily know, but as you allude to, nowadays there's a lot less actual courtrooms.
Right.
So, even the guys I was training under at the last law firm and the stories they would tell about the folks who train them, guys and gals, I shouldn't be gendered, but the folks who train them, they'd go to court every other week. They'd have 10, 20 trials a year, easy. We don't see those kinds of numbers nowadays. And I think that's a combination of, tort reform, which if you think that's a good idea and you're a human being out there, I just want to invite you to reach out to me if you want to have a discussion about why it's terrible. A terrible idea, takes away our rights. Insurance companies really getting into the game to try to maximize their profits and minimize their risk profile. And, to some extent, I think there's some fear on the plaintiff side. These cases cost so much nowadays. It's not unusual for us to put 60, 70, $100,000 into a case to get all the way through trial. And frankly, I don't know that a lot of firms have the bandwidth to handle the volume of cases they need to handle and still be able to do the trial work. And I think it's unfortunate in some respects. Now, sometimes that means people are resolving things without trial. Maybe that's a good thing. But we're seeing an uptick now, and we are making an effort to take a harder line. If people aren't taking these cases seriously, we hear this every day. Well, I settled this with these other guys, for this much. Well, that's not us. Or I did this in another case. That's not this case. And even with that approach, what I've seen, and if you're a plaintiff's lawyer out there hearing this, I think this is good insight for us. As we take a harder line and we expect to see more trials, they still settle the case. They still want to get out from under it. And so nowadays, I think it's more likely, a trial a quarter for a lawyer is kind of a normal thing. Now, Michael, my partner, is really focused on the trial work at the firm right now. I'm more focused on the management side, although we both do a bit of both. And he's, ramping up for trial right now. He's had 2 this year. He's got, what I mean? So he's got a higher number. But I think we need more cases going to trial. And frankly, and this is no shade on the Ohio judges I've worked with, they're not seeing as many trials. And I think newer judges aren't as used to that, right? They're coming out of litigation that doesn't end up in trial work as much. So I see them, the newer judges who maybe don't have that experience, really wanting it and doing a great job of trying to push that. But I think across the board, over the last 25 years, obviously, I think there's been many fewer trials than you would say the 25 years prior to that.
Wow. And another naive non-litigator question. Are most of the trials that you are doing and your partner is doing, are they bench trials? Are they jury trials? Are they
Great question.
Dispute resolution? What are you seeing?
Well, and that's a great one with the dispute resolution. So we only request jury trials. Now it depends on the state as to whether you can demand that and what you can do. And I think we always appreciate that it's kind of a group, kind of like when you put it out. What was that? Phone a friend or whatever. Take the poll of the audience. Like when you get a group consensus, I think statistically you get better results. You're more likely to get a correct outcome when you put 8 people together to debate it. And we like being able to speak to them. We like being able to speak to people who are not necessarily lawyers. I think lawyers themselves should second guess their thought process. Once you go through law school and you're dealing with this stuff every day, it's easy to lose perspective. I think a normal, quote unquote, non-lawyer coming in the room and hearing what's going on is going to have a much better idea of what to do in response, how big a deal this is, than a judge who maybe sees criminal stuff and all the civil litigation, kind of starts feeling like, maybe even subconsciously, this is just how things are out there. Whereas a juror comes in and says, wait, is this how things are out there? This is not how things should be. Let's do something about it. And so we aim for only jury trials. And the dispute resolution you mentioned, we see as in arbitration agreements. By the way, if anyone is signing any nursing home paperwork, you do not, at least in Ohio, and states differ, but most states, you do not have to sign on admission an arbitration agreement. It is never a good idea. It ends up, trust me, it's never a good idea to sign. And I always tell people when they tell me why arbitration's good, it costs less, generally not true. It goes faster, sure, but because you don't get to do things that you want to do. Whatever their reasoning is, I always say, look, if it's such a good idea, we can always agree to do it. Why do I have to sign away my rights now without even knowing what the circumstances are going to be? When if 5 years from now, mom passes away and I think it's your fault and you say it's such a great idea for us to arbitrate, well, great. Then let's do it. Let's decide to do it voluntarily, not make me sign this piece of paper when I don't know what's going on and force me to do it later. And just for anyone in the audience who's not familiar with arbitration, that is the concept of hiring somebody, often a retired judge, but a private individual, usually as part of an organization, the American Association of Arbitrators or whatever the case may be, to sit as the judge and jury. And the idea was originally pitched as courthouses are clogged up and this lawsuit abuse. By the way, statistically, totally false. There's no more lawsuits today per capita than there were 20 years ago. It's just totally made up by the insurance industry. And they've made a ton of money by doing that. But in any event, the idea is let's just skip the courts altogether. This pesky Constitution, these pesky jurors, pesky jury of your peers helping to care about the community. And let's go to a professional decider who, by the way, works for an organization whose bread and butter is being repeatedly hired by the organization that you think may have killed mom, right? And that's somehow like a great idea. It turns out, in my opinion, it's not. But, if anyone disagrees, I always remind them, look, you can always agree to do it later. No big deal. And by the way, no one does. No one ever agrees to do it later because they say, why would I ever do that? You go to see these arbitrators, 5, 10 times a year, and they depend on the income. I only have one mom who hopefully only have one case in my life like this. That person's not necessarily worried about my repeat business. Now, having said, there's great arbitrators out there. And we'll use them as mediators. But again, that's voluntary. We all agree to show up. We all agree to hear the person out, and they hear us out. And if we can resolve things, terrific. There's no benefit to lengthening litigation just for the sake of taking longer. We don't get paid by the hour. I think defense counsel that usually does get paid by the hour would agree. It's not to anyone's benefit if you can resolve it earlier, but you don't need to sign away your rights to do that.
All right. Wow. Great. Great advice. See, that's why you bring in excellent people on who specialize in things that we don't. That is so much fun to listen to and kind of hear your insights. That is so cool. So as a general rule, that is not a good idea, is what I'm hearing you say. So
that's right. And there actually was a rule. Medicare had promulgated a rule that would eliminate the requirement for forced arbitration. That got rolled back, unfortunately. But I believe it's still the case that you can't be forced into it. And I know that to be true in Ohio. I'm always hesitant to speak outside of my states of expertise, but you should ask. And when you're signing the paperwork, I know how it works because my clients tell me every day. I say, hey, you signed an arbitration agreement. They go, what's that? And I go, well, it was probably in that inch-thick stack of things that the admissions director kept pointing at a spot, and you kept signing, and signing. And one of those included something saying you're giving up your constitutional right to a jury. And so if you see that, and certainly if you are thoughtful enough to say, hey, can I take the paperwork home or look at everything you're signing, which even as a lawyer, we have to admit we don't always look at it. I mean, I don't know how many times you've scrolled through Microsoft's 500-page thing before you can open Word for the first time. But, so it's easy for me to say it in hindsight. But if you do have the opportunity, I would say, I don't want to sign arbitration. And don't just leave it blank. I'm not saying that they will forge it. I'm just saying exit out, say refused and keep moving on. And usually, in my experience, the admissions people, frankly, don't care. They just want a person signed up. So they don't have an interest in it at that point.
But once it's signed, it's difficult to get out of?
It is very difficult to get out.
Okay.
I have some litigation going about that right now, and we have a case where they had a woman who was both legally blind and on extreme painkillers on admission, and they had her sign the paperwork, supposedly by consent. So it's the admission director's, signature for this legally blind individual who was on painkillers on admission because they're just getting out of a hospital admission. And we're fighting it years later. We're fighting it out to enforce her right to a jury trial.
And still no determination. So we still don't know the outcome.
Knock on wood. I feel good about that one. We've really done. The lawyer in the case on our side has done some great digging and put the admission director kind of butt in the chair, sworn testimony, and really I think we've got a great shot on that one. But do you want to spend a year and a half fighting just to get to the starting line? No. And, you, I'm sure, are as tuned into this as anyone with the folks you work with. But, when someone has a loss like that, a traumatic loss, an unexpected loss with blame, we call that complex grief, is the term. And I'm not a psychiatrist or psychologist, so I'm only kind of superficially relaying this, so I don't want to speak out of turn. But that takes a toll on our clients. And so we counsel people when they start the case. As much as you want to do this, and we encourage you to fight for a loved one's rights and for accountability and to make change, we warn them, you're not going to be able to proceed through certain parts of your grieving process. This is going to be kind of an open wound as we go through it. And so if we can avoid that year and that trip to the appellate court for that person by just not signing that document, I think that's a great idea.
All right. Wow. I don't know if this is a very fair question because, I always hate when you're live on a podcast asking a question, but just generally speaking, not specifically, but when somebody is touring a facility with a loved one, a spouse or a mother or a father, is there anything in particular as they're walking around they should be paying attention to, or in conversations what they should be listening for? I mean, I'm just making this up.
No. That's a terrific question. And it's not even just on the kind of when you're deciding where to go, and I can speak to that to some extent. Also, while they're there.
Okay.
There's some things I'd recommend, and I have a few videos of this on the Facebook page, but just to kind of summarize, the number one thing we see that's a problem in these facilities is understaffing. And so if we have a bed sore case where you have a skin breakdown, it's going to be because they're leaving them wet and soiled. It's going to be because they're not helping them reposition. It's going to, the actual care at issue is whatever it is. The reason someone's leaving them wet, the reason someone's not coming in to help them move and reposition in bed and they're stuck in one position, just like, if you cross your legs for too long and your leg falls asleep and then you have that red mark, where your legs were crossed over or whatever. Yep. Imagine that's all day, and maybe you don't have as good sensation and feeling if it's a neuropathy or whatever. Wow. Well, that what's for us a little red spot that goes away might develop into an open wound. It's because of understaffing. It's because that staff member who's supposed to come in and check and change has 18 other grown adults they have to check and change every 2 hours, and has 18 other grown adults they have to help feed. They have to get dressed. They have to help brush their teeth. Right. They have to pass medications for the nursing staff. And when these companies, and often the parent companies for these chain organizations, don't provide the funding for the staff to meet those needs, that's when you see those outcomes. Same thing with falls. When we see falls where one staff member is taking someone to the bathroom when the care plan says they need two. Well, I interview these staff all the time, and they say things like, I can't get a second person. Where am I going to find a second person? There's only one of me on the unit. The nurse is passing meds. I'm alone with my 18 residents or 25 residents. I've had an aide tell me they have 30 residents at a time. I mean, I've had nurses who quit because they say my license is in jeopardy. And I have nurses who don't quit because they say, what happens if I leave? That's a tough position to be in. Yeah. So it's really staffing is the issue. And I want to say there's a website Medicare on Medicare.gov called Nursing Home Compare. And it may be broader now. I think they include hospitals and things like that. Just Google Nursing Home Compare Medicare. And you will see for any facility you want to look at, they'll have statistics. They call it a 5-star rating system. Now look. Facilities can fudge the numbers to certain degrees. They can do certain things that you might not be aware of till we get involved later. And of course, by then it's too late. But one of the most important things to look at is staffing. Okay. And if you have a facility that's a 2 or a 1-star staffing, they can't help everybody. They just can't. That's what that means, is that they have too many residents with too high care level to help every resident that they need to help. So staffing is probably the number one thing to look for. Now, how do you do that on a tour? I think it's a little hard, but you can, whether it's on the tour where guess what? They're going to want you to come on the day shift. They're going to want you to come on a day that's well staffed. They're going to schedule it. I've had cases where family who've been there for a while know that it's state inspection day. And how do they know? Because there's staff everywhere. There's staff, and they go, what? What's happening? Why are there so many people around? And then they see a state inspector walk by. So they can game the system a little bit, but ultimately you can see the real numbers on that Nursing Home Compare website. Staffing by far, most important thing you can have. And, there's the tried and true, does it smell? Okay. If it smells like human waste, and not just one guy just had an accident, is incontinent, and someone's going in to change them, that'll happen, okay? Let's be fair. But if the whole place smells, there's a reason for that. If you see staff, I don't see this as much, frankly. I mean, by and large, I think nursing staff, aides and nurses, want to do a good job. But if you see one person running around, kind of looking like they got too much on their mind, if you stop and ask a question and they hold on, I got all these things going on, right? That's not a great sign. But when you see staff taking time, when you see people feeling pleasant, I'll see things like residents will be parked. I've seen a resident parked in a wheelchair facing a wall. Well, that resident wasn't planning on staring at a wall for 6 hours. That was somebody who was so busy and maybe disconnected, shell-shocked by that point where that's what they do.
Oh, wow.
Now, I've also seen cases where when they have someone coming in, those people suddenly get put back in bed, or they get put in the common room, or they're watching TV. So one thing I recommend is stopping by at a time that's not pre-scheduled, particularly if you have someone there and you have a schedule of visits. The fact that your loved one is up and clean and dressed every time you see them, if you're coming at the same time, same days of the week, that might be the first time they got up and dressed and out. And so if there's a disconnect between what they seem to be doing for them and how they're doing, I find coming off hours, I got that from clients, frankly, telling me, hey, I'm a nurse. I know what's up. I don't call before I come. They told me to, but why would I do that? Why would I call so they can go, oh, Gina's coming, get Miss Jane up and cleaned up? Well, no, you want to come in and see how Miss Jane's doing, how Mom's doing.
Right.
Before they know. And the main thing I've seen, obviously this is something I can go on about. One of the main things I think you can do is be present as much as you can, including if there are friends and family that you can kind of split duties with, just to get a report. What's going on in the evening? If you have someone who works during the day, can't come in until just before dinner, how's that looking? Is anyone helping them eat if they need assistance? Are they clean? Are they dressed? Are they even out of bed?
Right.
Are they getting into bed? I've had cases where people park someone next to a bed and leave. Oh. And about an hour and a half of sitting there, staring at the bed they want to get into, and they're going to try and get up, and then they blame the resident. They say, well, they didn't listen. They got out of their wheelchair. So I'd say, being present, off hours, and without pre-announcement is probably the best way to really know what's going on. And then I could go on and on about this, but that's kind
amazing.
of the big stuff.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. If my listeners were looking to find you, how would they locate Eadie Hill on the internet, or a phone number to reach you, or what's the best way to contact you?
Well, luckily my name's a little bit unique. So if you just Google Eadie Hill, EADIEHILL, 2 words, we should be the ones that come up. There is an artist, I think, Eadie Hill, which is interesting, but I feel bad if we push them out of the rankings. And it's eadiehill.com. We're on Facebook and all of those things. And I have a standalone Facebook with where I really focus on being healthy in a nursing home. Because like I said, we have job security. I don't think that's going away. But to the extent someone can watch a video about preventing dehydration, preventing malnutrition, how to address bed sores, what to do if they tell you there's a bed sore, and they don't have to call me, that's a win. And so if you look me up, Will Eadie, we have a hashtag healthy in a nursing home. And frankly, if you have ideas, I've learned more from family members and great ideas. I just love to pass those tips on. Because like I said, if I don't get a case, that's a lot better than getting, the only thing I can do is get some accountability, get you answers, and get money, which frankly, my clients would rather have a button they could push and pay money to go back in time and not have this happen. They're not happy about that money. Now they use it for good things. A lot of our clients want to invest that in nonprofits. I don't know if I should bring up, we're working towards a nonprofit of our own, a foundation that can kind of do that.
Oh, wonderful.
We have a grassroots group like Elderly Advocates in Ohio, which I think there are other ones around the country, or start one. If you don't have one in your state, I highly encourage you reach out to the Elderly Advocate folks in Ohio, because that's what they did. When they called me and I said, I can't help you, and the state said, tough luck, and they said, what else is there? They started it. So there's, none of these folks are in it for the money, ultimately. They really want accountability and change. So if we can do something even right now to help avoid that, to help keep that case from getting to us, then that's better than, a great verdict at trial, frankly.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. I had so much fun. I cannot believe that we're already at the 30-minute mark. I told you, It flies by, which is incredible. So I want to thank my friend Will Eadie for joining me. He is with Eadie Hill, and they do nursing home abuse litigation from Ohio primarily, but also in Western Pennsylvania. So if you need anything, please look out for him at Eadie Hill, and they will be able to assist you. For my local listeners, thank you very much for joining the Red Wagon Estate Planning and Elder Law Show, hosted by me, Jeffrey Belomo, where we discuss all things estate planning and elder law, and, well, hey, anything else we want to talk about. Today was a little bit on the fringe. It was a little bit of elder law, but we certainly kind of had a great guest and had a little bit of fun with Will and discussing what he does. So, Will, thanks for joining us. And everyone, we look forward to seeing you on the next Red Wagon Estate Planning and Elder Law Show. Until then, we'll see you real soon.